Welcome to the High Note Podcast. In this episode, I invited Craig Colclough to come and sit down with us. Craig is a world-renowned opera singer, father, and hilarious storyteller. We got to talk about how he got started, the different cultures in the US versus Europe when it comes to opera singers, and all of the different parallels that he sees between traditional athletics and stage athletics. And if you're one of those singers who wants to take advantage of the millions of dollars and millions of hours spent in traditional athletics to use for your own development, the first step is taking the mind-body connection assessment that you can find in the description down below. Make sure you check that, schedule your interpretation, and I can't wait to see your results. And without any further ado, here's Craig. Welcome to the High Note Podcast. I am Ted Zimnicki, founder of High Note Performance and HNPacademy.com, where we bring the tools perfected by sports science and neurology to vocal artists and turn singers into the world-class athletes that companies want to hire again and again and again. Today, coming in all the way from Sweden is someone who I could not be more excited to introduce. He was recommended as an incredible guest, not just once, but twice, including by his very own brother. It is an absolute privilege and honor to welcome him to the podcast today. This bass baritone has sung leading roles in literally every major opera house I could think of, and even a few I had forgotten about until I had read his incredible bio. It is the already legendary in his own time, Craig Colclough. Thank you so much for joining us today.
That is very sweet of you. Thank you. That is an ego-pumping introduction.
Maybe just a touch of WWE in my background, who knows?
Yes, exactly. But let's get ready for vibrato.
I would love to start off, just for anyone who might not know, and who might not have just heard that intro. Craig, What do you do?
Gosh, let's see. I am, well, in my opinion, I am a low voice Zwischenfach, which I've never heard anybody, I've only heard that described to women, but I wear it as a bit of a badge because in certain time periods of composition, I will sing lower and I'll sing bass baritone rep, like Leporello and Figaro, for example. But then I have another life where I moonlight as a quasi Verdi baritone, where I've sung a lot of Falstaffs and a lot of Macbeths, which are the two lower of the Verdi baritones. I wouldn't sing Rigoletto, for instance. And then my real now adult career in my 40s is the Wagner Helden baritones, where I'm doing Curvinal in Tristan and Isolde, and I'm doing Telramund a couple times in Lohengrin. I got to do that at the Royal Opera House. That was a kick-ass job.
Awesome.
And I am here in Sweden doing my first Flying Dutchman.
Your first one?
Which is the hardest thing I've ever sung, but also it fits me like a glove. And it's just like, oh, I've been waiting my whole life to sing this. And then this summer, I'm going to a festival in Austria where I'm doing my first ring cycle as Alberich, not as Wotan. That'll maybe come later. But right now, my background is more from a character actor standpoint in musical theater. So even though I'm doing very legitimate dramatic rep now, I have much more fun playing really crazy characters or doing comedy. So Alberich is much more fun to be doing right now. But someday Wotan, that'll be fine. It'll be fine. I can wait.
There are still more mountains for you to climb somewhere, it sounds like.
Yeah. It's funny. Dutchman was my last dream role. Yeah, it was really weird. About 2 years ago, I had sung, Falstaff. I had sung Nick Shadow. I had sung pretty much. I had finally done a Leporello, which took me forever to get. I don't know.
Really?
See, and that's what I'm talking about with like being a Zwischenfach. Is my career has not been a typical bass baritone trajectory. I have jumped all over the place in and out because I was a baby Wagnerian, and people are like, for the next 10 years. Yeah.
I was noticing that you had Leporello and then Wagner on your resume very close to each other. So I was going to ask how that came to be,
Yeah.
but you answered my question before I asked it. So
Well, and another detail is the venue is very important
Hmm.
because I was doing Leporello at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in Los Angeles, which is a barn, and it
Hmm.
was not built with an acoustic singer in mind. It is a brutal sing. And it's weird that I grew up there because when I got out of like young artist peripheral stuff, only singing at LA Opera, and I went to another theater that actually had acoustics, I was like, it's so easy.
Can work
um,
like 10% is hard. This is so cool. Thank you,
yes, yes.
architects.
And the first time I did an audition at the, what is it, the Aix-en-Provence theater or something. It's this little like 300 seat wooden theater, which was
Oh.
the kind of theater that Mozart was. And all of a sudden I did the recit and I was like, oh, that's what he was doing. He would this space. So to like Wagner in Europe, Mozart at the Dorothy Chandler, like the original cast, I did it with Lucas Meacham, who is phenomenal, of
Mm.
course. Lucas friggin' Meacham. But originally I was cast with me and Chris Maltman as the Count.
Mm.
And he is just a barrelingly loud Verdi baritone. So we had a Wagner, we had a Helden baritone and a Verdi baritone to sing Mozart at the Dorothy Chandler. It was going to be the loudest cast of Mozart you'd ever heard. So yeah, it was a venue consideration that they have to cast weird voices for their Mozart over there.
Yeah, and then you have other venues that are meant for Wagner. I mean, Bayreuth and Parsifal come to mind right away, where it sound. I'm only assuming that you also fit in quite well there when you get into that heavier rep.
I haven't sung at Bayreuth yet, but to do my first iteration of these roles in smaller houses is really important so that
Mm.
you don't so you can learn how to sing it. And like you were saying about the athleticism, right? The athleticism of doing these roles and figuring out your pacing over the night and figuring out, because that's the main thing with with Wagner. The most important thing, not well, yeah, maybe. I did my first Tristan and Isolde with Stuart Skelton, who is like, one of the premier Helden tenors in the world and whatnot. So it was a real privilege to get to sing next to him. And he said that the role, these massive roles, are not so much about continuous stamina, but quick recovery time.
Mm.
And that was something that kind of broke my brain because you sing this huge, like 6 minute scene where you just nonstop massive voice. And then the other person on stage sings their 6 minute massive response. And you take that time to regather and you have to literally recover in that amount of time and start again. So it's not like Mozart where you're just singing through this consistent arc all night. There are literally periods like in Dutchman where the first scene is way too long. I start with a 13-minute blasting aria, massive orchestra, and then I do a whole scene with the bass and I have to sing this duet with all these beautiful arcing lines and everything. And it's just like, oh God, the half an hour after that, or maybe it's about 45 minutes, that time is crucial. And by the time I get back, I have to have completely reset
Mm.
to sing the next aria, the next entrance of the next scene. And it's scary because sometimes by the end of that first scene, I feel like I'm done. I feel like my voice is shot.
Mm.
And you're like, nope, you gotta fix it and get back out there. Whew. Sorry,
Yeah.
terrifying myself
Well,
with
just to draw
flashbacks.
a comparison to more traditional athletics, I like to sort of draw
Yes.
a defining line between traditional athletics and then stage athletics. And I think you obviously are a stage athlete. You're probably also a traditional athlete too, but that might come up later. That sounds a lot like the way that a coach would approach a track and field meet, where the thing
Yes.
takes all day long, but you might
Yes.
be having to give your 100% effort for, depending on your event, of course, for 10 seconds, for 10 minutes. But then you have a certain period of time where you get to completely recover, but then you have to go again, right? So that
Yeah.
time in between is just as important as the time when you're showing off, when you're performing.
Yes, you're still on the job.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a great parallel. I'm gonna scoot you back just a little
Yeah, no worries. Uh,
bit.
yeah, well, cool. I'm glad you think so. I spend all day thinking about stuff like this. Uh,
Yeah.
so let's sort of take a step back, because where you are to so many people seems unattainable, right? You're
Yeah.
talking to someone who, these younger singers who are in undergrad, grad school, and they see someone like you who is, of course, 15, 20 years older than they are. Can you sort of talk through the path that you took, starting maybe even at 18 to where you are now?
Well, it's interesting. I find it really helpful talking to somebody who has the athletic mindset as well, and that these comparisons, there are so many wonderful parallels in that, um, when you're looking at if you wanted to have an athletic career, right? There are certain sports that you genetically are not going to succeed at.
Mm-hmm.
With my body, I'll never be a sprinter. I'll never be a long distance runner.
Yeah, you
I
can't
could,
teach
I
height.
could, yeah, exactly. I could train. I could become very good at my discipline, and I could make personal, like I could do my personal best and I could keep improving. I could do those things. But in the bigger competition, it's just never going to happen. I just don't genetically have it. So, one of the things about the unattainableness of this career is, and they don't talk about this a lot in school because the singers are so young, that you don't want to completely prejudge someone, because and there are also many voice types.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing.
It's not just the
So
four.
exactly. That's why I was like, I'm a bass baritone and a Verdi baritone and a Helden baritone. And it's like those three kind of baritones are all different stylistic voices. And it's real weird because I'll be standing around, like I had this surreal moment when I was standing outside the Met with Christian Van Horn and Lucas Meacham and Quinn Kelsey. And it was the four of us. And I was standing there and I was like, holy shit. Like, these are, I'm standing here with the top baritones in the world, and they're each completely different.
Mm.
There are a few places where their rep overlaps, but we're all baritones standing here, and we do not sing the same thing.
Oh.
Um, so part of the wisdom of a young singer is figuring out and listening to your genetics and saying, I don't have to be every kind of singer. I don't have to be every voice type if I'm going to be marketable. I only can be what I was gifted in my physicality. And I have to, if I want to market it as a business, if I want to make this a business, I have to be realistic about the physical product that I have and how I use it, because I can't market myself as something I'm not.
Mm. Yeah, I
So
think
that's
that.
that's
Oh, go ahead,
yeah.
please.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first kind of like hard hitting like realism getting out of school. And I think the young artist circuit does a great disservice to that reality
How do you mean?
because, for instance, when you do a vocal competition, there are requirements for vocal competitions that you have a piece from the 1600s, a piece in German, a modern work in English, and a piece in Italian. That is not how careers work. Careers do not require you to diversify over a 300-year period
Mm.
and sing all these things. And so for young singers, they're like, oh God, I have to be everything. I have to be everything to everybody, and I have to fit into all these categories in order to compete and impress. That must be what the professional world is like too. And it's like, oh no. Competitions are their own racket.
Mm.
They're their own business.
Well, and
They
there are
are, they
people
are,
who, oh, excuse me, but there are people who really
yes,
excel in competition who really
yes,
don't in opera, and vice versa as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There are people who clean up the audition because they've got this package. Um, they've got this package set that's a balance of like party arias and yet complicated.
I love
And
that
that's the
term,
other big
party
thing that I
aria.
like to talk. Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
great.
Well, that's the thing I like to explain to young singers, as many singers as can hear this as possible, is that not all competitions are built the same either. Is that you have to research who you're singing for. Because if you sing for a council of here, this is literally what happened to me. If you sing for the Met Council and they have a board of casting directors or agents who are your regional judges, and say I choose one of the three Le Nozze di Figaro arias, okay? Se vuol ballare, the first one, is way too easy, and it's not that catchy. The party aria is non mi dai farfallone amoroso, not the John. When you go in and you sing that, they say, well, that's lovely, but I need the fourth act aria because that is the hardest thing in the whole show. And if
Mm.
you are competing at the Met Council, I need the most technically challenging of the role. So you have to go in and sing the difficult one. But then you'd go, oh, now I know. You take that to a smaller company who's doing a regional company who's doing an in-house competition for their donor base. And their donors are like, we want to support young artists. We want to put money, we want to have a foundation. You're like, that's lovely. I'm going to show up and I'm going to sing the hardest thing I can possibly sing. And they're like, I don't really know that piece. Couldn't you have sing like the Toreador song?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, I was singing for I had the complete wrong intention. These people wanted a gala concert that could be a ticket thing and could be a nice entertainment piece.
Mhm.
And then you go for the Met Council, and they don't give a crap about entertaining anyone. You are at hard level competition. So it's like the difference between like the technical skate and then what's the artist one afterwards where they just get to have fun and like do you
Just
know what I'm talking
playing,
about
just
with figure
goofing off,
skating?
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a performance part afterwards where you're like, let's have fun and do a backflip and stuff. Um, so yeah, you got to know your audience and and realize that these requirements for competitions are also not directly connected to the professional world.
Yeah, you mentioned this once, and when we were kind of talking about this in the frame of a business, which I absolutely love. Do you remember when that became clear to you that this was such a business and needed to be approached as such?
When I realized it, well, my wife was a professional as a kid.
Oh,
And that gave us a lot of insight because um, she had a recording career where she would be a studio singer as a child,
hmm,
and then she also did some touring. Like she played Annie, and she would be one of the girls in The Sound of Music, and like she was a child actress. But her parents wanted her to fit parts that she didn't fit,
oh,
and they would take her out to auditions where she didn't have the look. She didn't fit the mold.
yeah.
And they tried having her wear color contacts. They dyed her hair blonde. They were trying to squeeze her out of what she is genetically and sell her as something she wasn't. And what that does psychologically to kids, that's why you get so many effed up child actors, because their frontal cortex is not developed. They don't have the intellect to separate me presenting a product with my body and my personal value. Um, and even in college, and singing is such an emotionally vulnerable thing. You're putting so much of yourself and your art, and you care, and it's a very exposing, a very naked experience for such a long time,
Hmm.
that that development, it really is. It's really hard to emotionally manage until you're towards the end of college. Um, just brain science developmentally, it's hard. Um, so the sooner you can just repeat to yourself, what I put on stage is like if I manufactured a pair of shoes. If I put a pair of shoes in a store window and somebody's like, man, those aren't my style. You're not like, oh, I am personally, you don't like me? I'm not good enough?
Yeah.
Because then another person comes along and goes, shoes, I'm gonna put those on. So when we go to a series of auditions, we're thinking, I'm either good enough or I'm not. I'm either right or I'm wrong. And honestly, you just got a panel of people who are like, it's not my particular taste. And that's really hard to accept that it's not a gauge on your talent. It's rough. For instance, there's a casting director at San Francisco Opera. He's got his chunk of bass baritones that he likes. I am not in that chunk.
Mm.
I would love to go up there and work. They have the most magnificent orchestra you have ever heard.
They do.
Like it, because I covered Bryn there one time for Falstaff, and just getting to sit like, and it was great because I took my baby. My eldest was, gosh, probably like 4 at the time. And we would crawl up in the balcony on one of the side things where you could see down into the pit. And yeah, and we're listening to Falstaff played by, and it was just one of the best. I mean, they're right up there orchestrally with the Met, and for a while, the English National Opera had one of the best. I don't know how they're doing now because they a while back decided they're not hiring Americans because they're all nationalists and they got freaking weird during the economic downturn. Never mind. Drama, different
Yeah,
stupid
different
drama.
conversation. That might be above my
Different
personal pay
different.
grade, but
Right. Well, they I loved working for them. It was a huge, wonderful moment in my career. Like it was really important when I got to go work for the English National Opera. So it was a tragedy when they had all this public Brexit energy that tried to be like, we're the English National Opera. We shouldn't be hiring Americans.
right.
And it's like, it's a whole big thing. But what was I saying? Oh, yeah. So even though they're one of the lower tier financially, their orchestra was, I mean, just pristine and recording quality, like, um, so yeah. So San Francisco, I would, I would absolutely love to go work there. The casting director's just like, it's not really my thing. And I just have to live with that. I just have to deal with
You have to
that.
wake
Just be
up
like,
and go to sleep with that energy in you.
yeah, this is being like, he's not, he's like, yeah, he knows I exist. He's seen me in things, he's seen me kick ass in places, and it's just like, not for this.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
I know from a lot of the singers that I've spoken with, one of the things that's so difficult to wrap their heads around along that same line is, especially when you're in school, it feels like the opportunities are so sparse. Like if you're in
Yes.
an undergrad institution, and your school might do 2 operas a year, right? Maybe
Yep.
3 or 4 if you're in the highest level of undergrad, right? Your Juilliards, your Curtises. So if
Right.
those are the only opportunities and you don't have the package, like if you're not the flavor of ice cream that that person wants on that day, that can be such a difficult thing to accept if they're doing a Donizetti and you have a Mozart voice or whatever. Like that's such a hard place to be. How would you counsel a singer like that?
Well, really good educators know that their young singers, especially in undergrad and most of the time even in graduate, really good educators know that their singers are not mature into what they will become. And they will pick rep at school where they can cast their singers who will not eventually sing that, who it doesn't, because at that point it doesn't matter what they'll become, it matters for what's good for them right in that moment.
Mm.
So the really good educators will will program uh, pieces that will facilitate the singers they have coming up into the junior and senior position, um, and will give them an opportunity. And the school singer has to remember, just because I'm singing this rep here doesn't mean this is what I'm going to become.
Mhm.
This opera is being put out of place. This is an educational use of this work. So yeah, you're taking a piece that has its own life and you're mutating it to facilitate education.
Yeah. When did you
Um,
really step into the repertoire that you feel really comfortable in?
yeah, good question. Several years after school. And luckily I connected with some male teachers who understood what my voice would become and told me, they're like, you've got a chainsaw inside your voice. You are going to become a Wagnerian, but you are not it now. So luckily, I had people in my life who could hear where I was going.
A
That was
chainsaw
right off the
inside
bat.
your voice. I haven't heard that metaphor before. Well,
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about that? A chainsaw inside your voice.
Yeah. My buzz and my the way my chords vibrate and pierce is not fluffy. It's not a true Verdi baritone. Whereas there's this ooh, like there's not that softness
Hmm.
that fits real well with Italian. And I haven't sung French rep since I was a young artist because I just don't sound like a French period in the height of French opera. I just don't sound like it.
Sure.
So that buzz, that bite in my voice was what keyed them off to what I would become.
Hmm.
What was your question?
When did you step into the roles that you feel really comfortable singing? The roles that you get paid for singing?
That's right. That okay. I got really lucky um, because one of the mistakes that one of my lovely late great voice teachers made was he thought I was a step lower than I was. He knew that I had
Hmm.
this bite and he had some of it right, but then he geared me towards a lower because of my range. He geared me a step too low. For instance, I sing Macbeth. I can sing the character of Banquo in that,
Hmm.
who is a true bass baritone. He is not a Verdi baritone. It is like the bass baritone national anthem. It's actually a gear shift too low for me.
Hmm.
It's not quite right. So in competitions, I was singing that when I should have been singing higher rep. Luckily, when I got into I would the first thing that kind of keyed people in was I started succeeding at kind of proclamatory things. For instance, in Fidelio, Pizarro's aria is
Yeah.
and my voice was able to do that without any injury,
Hmm.
without overstress. And luckily, I got into Wolf Trap, and it was Leanne. What's her last name? My Slusky something. I can't pronounce her last name. I'm sorry, Leanne. Um, it was Leanne and then Kim Whitman, who had run that program forever. And Kim has immaculate ears.
Hmm.
That's one of the reasons the program is such a massive pinnacle of the young artist world.
Do you know if they're still
Not
running
only
that
be
program?
oh yeah,
Okay.
oh yeah. And one of the reasons it's so great, it's just a summer program and they actually pay. That's one of the things that's so, yes, they actually pay a salary because they are really only bringing in people who are on their way out of young artistship.
Hmm.
It's like you this is not a program. They have a lower program for younger singers who they also field the most ridiculous college students you've ever heard. Like I saw their showcase and I was like, oh, why, what am I even doing? Like, I'm embarrassed for myself. Like, this is the studio class. Like, screw me, you know?
Wow.
But it was Kim who proposed to me, and I thought he was nuts. That she said, next year, we want you to do Falstaff. And I was 30 years old. And I was like, I'll do it. But are you nuts? You know?
I'm not going to say no to you, but what the hell?
And having to figure it out because it's a really tricky in-betweeny role because legit Verdi baritones can sing it, and then people like Bryn Terfel and Paul Pliszka have done, well, I mean, Bryn's done it all over the world. I've covered him twice now, and then I was offered a third time to cover him. I was like, no, I've done it. I've done it. I don't need to be like, he's lovely. He's a wonderful human being.
Sure.
But I need to make my own career. I
Right.
can't just, I can't just be a
I
cover.
can't be Bryn
Um,
Jr. for my entire life.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I was like, because he never cancels either.
Yeah,
He's a
he's
freaking
the
freight
man is a
train.
soldier. It's incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm like, there's no point in me being here. I've seen him do it, and 50 times. I'm good. Um, oh my God. But yeah, so having to figure out how to sing that at that age, that really pushed me, and she could tell, she could just hear, she was like, let me just nudge you up a clip. And that's when it was like, it's when I started sounding not just good, but better than others.
Mm.
Which is okay. So let me back up. You were talking about the lack of opportunity in school,
Yeah.
and this like feeling the scarcity. And I had also been kind of going about like making it a product and how to divide yourself and whatnot. So part of that division, part of that separating yourself from the product is an intellectual division of your ego as well, where when you look at that product and you look what you're creating, you have to be able to objectively compare it to the others around you. You have to be able to say, I have something that person doesn't. And that's not an egotistical thing. That is a technical realization of like, I can do that better than they can. Okay. And then you get hungry for what you can't do.
Mm.
And you because if you're too emotionally connected and you can't look at what you don't have, if you can't look at how you're not as good, then you'll never seek it out. You'll never go find it and overcome it. So you have to get excited to find, you go, oh, they can do that thing. I can't do that. How are they doing that? And you stalk them and you chase them and you figure it out. Um, so that's another part of the product separation is you have to enjoy what you don't have. One of the best experiences for me was when I made it to the Met competition semifinals. And when you get to the semifinals, they take you to New York and they give you a couple days.
Mhm.
The people who go on to the finals, they get like a whole week and they rehearse with the orchestra, and it's a much more engaging thing. But in the few days that you're there as a semifinalist, you get to go and see some shows, and you get to see some dress rehearsals, and they have you meet with one of their big stars or something. Um, and their when I saw their dress rehearsals for a couple things, it really hit me of how I wasn't ready,
Mm.
of what I didn't have, that I was good enough. I sounded good, but there was this chasm between me and the top level where you get hired at the top, where it is an alien, funky, unique precision and ability. And so I realized that I had worked and I had worked and I built this really good foundation. And I thought, I'm almost there. I'm at the semifinals. And this chasm opened in front of me where I was like, fuck. Oh, I've got like, oh crap. And it hurt. It definitely hurt to realize that I wasn't ready and that I had all this extra work to do. But that was what you had to go, okay, I gotta keep training, I gotta keep going.
That was a real make or break moment for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it was super impactful. But but that's one of the things that is the difference between I failed and I'm discouraged and I didn't get this. Why? And what's next? And how do I make it happen past that point?
Mhm.
Um,
I have this
the
feeling. What do I do with it?
yeah,
Rather than
yeah.
I
And how
have
do
this
you,
feeling. It now consumes me,
yes, and I have failed
and I
and I
have
will
failed.
not, yeah, yeah, which is just kind of like a psychotic drive. And
Which is
it is
such an
very
athletic thing.
true.
Like,
Yeah. Well, and like athletics, like how you have heats,
mhm,
right? You got a heat, and that one person who is the best moves on. You got another heat, and so it's these narrowing cones that every group you're in, you have to break to the front of that cone.
mhm.
Did you win? No. There's another heat of the winners of the last cones. And you have to be the best of that group, and you have to be the best of the next group. And because there are so few jobs, if you try to progress in the US, one of the things that you're going to come across is manufactured cones.
How do you mean
And
manufactured cones?
that they are intentional blockades to the flow of people who could make it, which is like auditions for young artist programs, for example. 7 positions, 500 applicants,
Right.
right? The things you will encounter that are keeping you from getting accepted don't necessarily have to do with what you could do, which is really unjust. It's really unjust because, again, just like competitions aren't really related to career. I mean, they're cousins.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that overlap, but the structure, not the same. Young artist positions are also not related to soloist success careers. Young artist positions are another cone. And while you're in it, you are a utility. You're not making art. You're not being a genius. You're not unless you're like Nadine Sierra and everyone goes, oh, well, she's going to be a megastar. Like, you know what I mean? Unless you're a freak of nature
Yeah.
and just don't go on the fact that you're going to be a freak of nature. No, nobody, it's
Yeah,
not going
and,
to
and
happen.
those people exist, but you would know it if you were one. You would not be questioning it. You would just like,
People would just be like, oh, here.
yeah. Oh,
You're like,
here's the
okay.
next 30 years of your life in contract. Like, enjoy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, so you don't have to worry about
Yeah.
us mere mortals. Um, Young artist programs are uh, utility singers, where what they're listening for in a young artist audition is that magical alien sound that shows a pristine technique and the ability for you to fill in little holes without hurting yourself. And that's pretty much all they care about.
Hmm.
Sometimes young artist programs will want to aggrandize themselves and they might take a risk on somebody who they're like, ooh, maybe there's something that they'll be a star. And then for the next 10 years on their resume, it'll be, I was a young artist of the Houston Grand Opera, and it like somehow kicks back to the opera company as some benefit. So every once in a while, people will get through that are like, oh, that was a weird choice. And they're just kind of rolling the dice on some people.
Well, I've also seen
So
it as a
that
cost saving measure too, right? Companies will give a young artist a supporting role or even a lead because they don't want to, or maybe can't pay someone of a higher caliber.
And we also, it's been a while since I've been a young artist, but I still think of myself as,
It's still inside us.
so
It
funny.
never leaves.
It never leaves. It never leaves. And also fulfilling grant requirements.
Oh, I hadn't considered that, but that makes perfect sense.
You do education outreach if the opera company provides enough. Like if I go and sing enough for enough third grade classes at the elementary schools throughout the district, then the government actually says, "Oh, we'll give you a little bit of money."
Yeah.
So that's another way young artists help contribute to the structure of an opera.
Yeah. So do you feel like the let me start that question again. I know
Yeah.
virtually nothing about how the system works in Europe, but you have worked in Europe quite a bit. Can you talk a little bit about the differences there? It sounds like the European system might be a little more um, forgiving is not the word I'm looking for, but a little more nurturing,
It's more flexible and
flexible.
diverse.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more the career paths are a little more diverse. I think that's what's about it. You can it's still challenging, but the number of theaters are far greater.
Hmm.
So right off the bat, you have a better hiring environment. They are looking more to allow they more quickly give trust to people who are 29 and 30,
Hmm.
where in the US, you will still be condescended against. You can have two kids and have buried your parents, and they're like, "You're a child, you're a young artist." And it's just like, ugh, like, what is this deep disrespect for youth? I'm like, have you ever seen Dudamel when he was young?
Hmm.
Do you know when Mozart wrote this opera we're singing right now? Do you know how effing young he
Yeah.
was? But I'm not an artist. Like, get bent. Um, we're working on that. The culture is getting better. The culture, I will say that I've uh, recently talked to many people. Like for instance, oh, I don't want to fuck up her name, Myra Huang, who runs the Met program now,
Hmm.
is lovely, and she actually like considers mental health and things, and like is meeting with Sasha Cook at Song Festival or is it no Music Academy of the West.
Oh, okay.
And they're just lovely people getting in these positions. So the culture is getting better. So that's an encouraging thing. If a young artist is watching this, there are places where you can demand to be treated like a human being and like a legitimate. So it's getting better in the U.S. However, the the responsibility of what they task you with is still where in Europe, even if you're young, if you're showing promise, a smaller company is going to hand you a role,
Hmm.
or you know what I mean, or if you can get into a fest, you can become a house singer, and they skip over that long-term young artist thing. There are individual promotional programs. Houses still have um like this person is in the like I can't remember what they call it because it's all different languages, but I
Sure.
think the
Yeah.
house I worked for in Belgium for a while, I think they called it their studio, where they had some singers that were like half educational and whatnot. But it's just that they more quickly, if you show promise, they give you actual roles in a position and say, be an adult,
Hmm.
work. And so you're then a double-edged sword. You're less coddled and you have less time, but then you're also, if you're ready to go and you want to act like an adult and prove yourself, that's quicker. That reminds me, I got really lucky. And this sounds like it was not lucky, but when I went to do my young artistship at Florida Grand Opera, um, my boss got fired,
Hmm.
and then my second boss got fired.
Oh, okay. A lot of
Both
turnover.
for different, yeah, both for different reasons. And they didn't really know what to do. And they kind of like sloughed us off onto the chorus master who didn't have time. And it was the best thing that could have possibly happened
How so? That's so interesting.
because then we were left alone to just be adults.
Hmm.
They said, here's your job, go do it. And everybody in that group was like, oh, thank God. And we just did our job. We just showed up and worked and we're professional. And then we had our coaches
Hmm.
that we could schedule our own time with. And we were like, hey, I need to work this role. You have time to meet? Yes, blah, blah, blah. And we just handled our own crap. And um that really fit with my paradigm and what I experienced in high school, which was a magnet theater school with 500 students.
Oh, okay.
So immediately when I was in high school, I was in the mindset of I am competing with literally hundreds of people. I have to work. I have to be the teacher. One teacher does not have time to hold my hand or wipe my ass. All of us learned from each other.
Hmm.
And if you went to our professor with a question, she'd say, figure it out.
So
And you
you were
just go
you were
like,
kind of brought up in that like
oh, oh,
self-sufficient, half competitive, half collaborative, but very like all of the onus is on you to make something happen and to make it
yep,
brilliant at the same time.
yep. And that's actually why I met my wife, because she was commuting into that school because
Mhm.
she had grown up as a professional. So she knew about this program being excellent, and she was driving in from another city
Wow.
um, just for that program. And she and I were both like, hey, 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 you know how to do all this. Like, yeah, you're freaking great.
Let's rock
So,
and
yeah,
roll. And then here you are, however
yeah,
many
yeah,
years later. Uh, I love that. That's so cool that you had that environment from the start. I think that's something that is lacking in so many places. It certainly was for me. I had public school growing up, and then
yeah,
in college, looking back, it felt
yeah.
more a lot like a coddled, like it's okay, everything's gonna be fine environment. Um, and this was even what, more than 10 years ago now. And from
Yeah.
everything I know from my friends who are back in academia, that hasn't gotten better, to put it lightly. Uh, so that, I mean, you mentioned chainsaw earlier, so I've got that on my mind. But that kind of that like chainsaw environment where
Ah,
it's like put up or shut up.
yeah.
It's got to happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it can only be valuable long term, even if it is difficult and cutthroat in the moment. Do you feel like that ever changes as you ascend the ranks of professional theater?
When recently there was something recently that switched. There is a weird transition from up and comer to established. And I can tell you exactly when it happened.
I'd love to know.
I was working for this company in Belgium. Um, it was great. Absolutely loved it. Wonderful town, wonderful. But they serve Ghent and they serve Antwerp. They serve two different cities. Sometimes when they do a production, they will write together, do a run in one city, and then pick up and immediately do the run in the next
Hmm.
city. They had scheduled Macbeth, where I was scheduled to do the following year, and they already had a baritone to do this year.
Hmm.
A problem occurred with the baritone they had, and they said he was starting to fall apart, poor guy. And they asked me to just come to cover. And I was like, okay. So I'm like cramming it, I'm cramming it, I'm cramming it, I'm coming to cover. I know technically I wasn't prepared until to do it until the next year. Sure enough, I ended up having to do it.
Hmm.
it was very overwhelming and exciting and insane. And I had to like learn it while I was staging this crazy thing in this modern pit and all this climbing. And it was very physical. Crazy experience. Did it. Everything was fine. Everything was relatively normal. I was like, oh, yeah, nice, nice. Okay, great. It was lovely. Then, before the next season, I went and jumped in to do it at the Met because I was covering Domingo.
Hmm.
So I made my Met debut as Macbeth, which was a fucking dream come true,
Yeah, that's
especially
amazing.
looking all the way back to that semifinal and saying I have all that distance to go to take a decade to come back, like, and to get that big, glorious, insane, amazing moment.
Not to mention that
Um,
role is just phenomenal.
yeah, it ain't easy.
Yeah.
Um, oh, and that was another thing, just another cool story was Maestro Armilietto, or is it Armilietto? Can't remember if it's two T's or one. I apologize. Um, he was conducting it. The sweetest man in the business. He is so competent and so just a beam of sunshine. I'm jumping in. I'd been covering. I had coincidentally been blocking in the cast to Lady Macbeth.
Mm.
So as cover, I was just serving in her rehearsals. She was already programmed to do some of the performances at the end of the run
Yeah.
when Netrebko had to go do something else. So I was just in the room staging with her. So the conductor had heard me, the casting director had heard me, the core, everybody who needed to like check off this unknown had heard me do the role in the room. And so I actually got approved instead of them flying in some other star.
Mm.
So I'm at the last minute. I'm jumping in. It's so exciting, blah, 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 blah. And this maestro comes in before the show and he goes, need anything? And I was like, no. And he goes, we'll follow you. It's just, just, my God. Did he just say the Met Orchestra will follow? Like, because for decades, it was like, you will do exactly what I say.
Yeah.
You are a servant, you are a peon, you are a soldier, and
That
I am God, and
Toscanini
you are nothing.
dictator at the podium, like,
Yes. And he goes, we'll follow you. And I just, so great. So the most comfortable I possibly could have been in this situation. Absolutely insane. But that actually wasn't, that moment was a collegiate equality that was amazing and lovely. But when I went and did my second run, same Belgium company at the other city, at the after party, when I walked in, having debuted at the Met, the way the donors looked at me and the energy that I got from these people, I was like, oh, what the hell?
hmm.
Like, I'm like, same guy, same performance. Suddenly I've made it. It's like, ooh, and I could just feel it. And it was like, oh wow, this is weird.
Hmm.
This is weird. So that definitely was the moment where I was like, okay, I have hit a different level. And like for instance, I'm sorry is this too much?
No, I love it. Please.
Okay. Like for instance, I was another Macbeth I was doing at Chicago Lyric. And like there's just one day, there are all these dead babies in the show, and I have
Oh.
3 kids. I'm a very involved father, and the whole show is about dead babies. And we had this like movie realistic stillborn baby that like jiggled and was covered with amniotic blood and all this stuff. It was hard. It was a hard production emotionally. But this funny moment of being somebody was in the room. You have the big open stage in the rehearsal room that's all mapped out with tape on the floor to represent the stage. And then depending on the size of the room, there are these little aisles on the side where you get all the folding chairs for everybody to sit when they're not on stage during rehearsal. over on the side, it was a day that we had the supers and the dancers. Supers are non-singing
Mhm.
roles, just for your
Yeah, of
audience, in
course.
case I know you know. Uh, sorry. So the supers and the dancers were there that day because there were big fight scenes and everything. And I was just a little tired. And I'm usually very outwardly cheery. It's just my natural disposition. Um, and I just like people. It's like, so when I get in the room, I'm like, oh yay. Like I'm always just, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
this was an odd day that I was just kind of like, I was a little tired. And my bag that I had put by one of the folding chairs was like over in a thing, and there was just too many people in the space. And I was trying to get to my bag, and one of the supers like pulled the chair that my bag was leaning against. And I was just like, oh, my bag. Like, I was like, oh, there it's just like real, just like not a big deal, but just like, oh, I can't get to it. And the group of them reacted like in fear,
In
of
fear.
like, oh, oh crap, like, did we upset him? And I was like, oh no, it's cool. It's cool. Like, whoa. This is not that. This
Yeah.
is not that. I'm not like
It's like somehow wires got crossed. Like this is not the vibe. Like the situation is not. Yeah.
but because if I was just a nobody,
Sure.
right?
A
Like
young
I was
artist.
for so many years, that react. I never would have gotten that visceral like fear reaction.
Hmm.
So it clicked that at that point, what I realized, and it was funny because I went home and I talked to my wife about it immediately, and I was like, I suddenly have a little more responsibility.
Hmm.
I have more responsibility in the environment to be a leader and to express the collegial, because for so long being a young artist and being a thing, the atmosphere is dictated by everybody
Yeah.
else. You're just a peon, and it's the director and the conductor, and they're the ones that rule over the energy of the room and everything. So that was the shift, was to go, oh, okay, my work on stage is the same, but now I have this other bit of responsibility, being going to companies and being title characters, and
Mhm.
like, I am the Dutchman and I am Macbeth, and you know what I mean? Like, you go, okay, it's a yeah, you just have another level of job, another, you need to be aware on a new level of caretaking,
Hmm.
um for the cast and for the space,
Almost like you have
that I
to.
didn't.
Almost like you have to really set the example of how to conduct yourself as a singer, as a performer, as a professional in
Yes,
rehearsal room, in dress rehearsal, and of course in performance.
exactly. Because being a young artist, I have plenty of experiences where a singer that was important would throw a fit,
Mm.
or a director would be maniacal and super negative, and it would just ruin everyone's day. It would ruin the art. It would be hurtful, and it was toxic. And so it's actually a joy to be able to have that responsibility and insist upon kindness and insist upon a respectful atmosphere, to finally be like, yes, I can execute the kind of working environment, I can influence the working environment I've been dying for all these years. It's really nice.
I think that says a lot about you and your character as a human, that you would first of all notice that you had that kind of responsibility and then react to it in a like in the way that you did, in a this is perfect, now I can make this a kind, helpful, nurturing, lovely space, compared to other
Right.
singers who I may or may not have spoken to, who noticed a similar responsibility and went exactly the opposite direction of, oh cool, now it's my turn to haze the people coming up. And I think
Oh, that makes me
for
physically
anyone
uncomfortable.
who's just listening, I gave Craig a seizure by saying that.
Yeah, I'm literally like, my back, like literally the muscles in my neck went.
Yeah, and it's
Um,
unfortunate, but I bet you've experienced it, right?
and I've seen people say it with pride. and this sick that my value comes. Well, that's a you want to do a spin-off conversation. You want to go sideways here. Is it's part of the older generation's culture of saying, I was forced to be abused. I was
Mhm.
forced to suffer. I was made to go to war and watch people get blown to pieces. And my country insisted that I was valiant and that my value, right? Fatherhood, getting the money for the family, not showing emotion, all of those things, those heavy responsibilities in uh, tandem with not being able to seek out the emotional support you need or the emotional dexterity and communication in order to bear those burdens,
Mhm.
and then to be told that that suffering is from which your value is derived. So, and then that is passed on from generation to generation. Say, I was trained that suffering is how I gained value, that accepting abuse, that going to war, and that is where my manhood is from. That is manliness.
Right.
And when you pass that down from generation to generation, hazing makes perfect sense, because then you're like, oh, well, I was abused and tricked into thinking that it made me better, which is just another level of abuse.
Which is another thing that
It's
is
just,
absolutely that is perfectly paralleled in every athletic endeavor too. Uh,
yeah, tell me.
oh, absolutely. So, I mean, the mentality, the stages of development that you just laid out exists in every single athletic event at the same time. I mean, the most common one in the States is through American football. For any European listenings, it's hand egg, right? So you have to be a man and you have to grit your way through it and you play hurt like that. Play hurt is all over the sport of hockey. I played hockey for many years, and it's if you're not hurt, you didn't play hard enough.
I grew up with the expression sacrifice your body for the team.
Exactly, exactly. Lay out for him,
Wow.
like in
I have
baseball,
not
lay out like that. Literally, throw yourself on the ground to stop a speeding ball that was just hit with a bat at 100 or so miles per hour. It's exactly the same mentality, and there are people in the traditional athletic realms that are coming around to this new way, and the people who they're coaching and they're producing also happen to now be at the highest levels at the top of their sports too. Shocking. Fear is not the best motivator. Amazing. uh, but
Same for art.
yeah,
It
it's
doesn't
another
make good
perfect
art.
parallel.
It doesn't, we have to have accessibility to our inner child. We have to have emotional dexterity.
Mhm.
And the minute you make that room toxic, everybody is going to lock up their ability to perform sincerely. I'm not going to share myself with the room when I'm being abused. It's
Yeah,
shit art.
yeah. I th-
Yeah.
I think that the most amazing things come though when you have a proper balance of both things, right? Like if you're on a spectrum, the end of the spectrum, no matter which end, is never the right place to be, right? So the magic is in the middle, right? So having that mix of grin and bear it and having the ability to deal with hard things. I think now we've probably swung
Yes.
too far on one side of the pendulum, and I'm not going to get too deep into that. But
Well, but
um,
like you were saying with the education system
yeah,
being too coddling,
exactly.
it, I think the balance is in loving hard work.
I I love that you said that. Oh, making my heart sing
Working
on this, Craig.
hard, it has its own joy. And when you're in a room with brilliant people, one of my favorite things is that I'm rarely the smartest person in the room in opera. I'm surrounded by these people who exceed me in so many ways, and we work hard together. And it's not this floppy like that everything's acceptable. No, 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 no. We all love the struggle. We're all mountain climbers. You don't climb Everest because you're averse to pain or you don't have toughness and resilience. You climb it because you love the challenge, and it's kind of, it reminds me of like the different yogas,
Totally.
the different yogis, how there's like meditation, and then one of them is work. There are these different paths
Yeah.
to joy and enlightenment, and one of them is hard work. And that's like in the educational setting, the when we were left on our own, it was saying, I trust you to bear a certain level of facility, that you are capable. It's saying you are capable. Go do, embrace your power.
Yeah.
I am not going to hold your hand. And a lot of the people in my high school, for instance, thought that there was a meanness to that it was somehow mean, but it was never. There's a director, and I used this example recently too. So it's weird when you feel yourself repeating yourself. It almost feels insincere, and you're like, I just told this story. Like,
Well, not to
okay,
me.
but
It's
no,
new.
but
It's a new story to me.
thank you, good. If you've ever seen I Heart Huckabees,
Oh, absolutely.
that's hell. Oh, how am I not myself? How am I not myself? So Shania hates mayo. Do you remember that?
It,
Oh my God.
it has been a while since I've seen it, so that specific line has left me. But now I have to go back and check it out again.
Anybody out there, go watch I Heart Huckabees. It will break your reality. So this director, Paul Curran, British guy,
Mhm.
theater, great guy, works regularly with the young artists at LA Opera, but I never met him there. I was doing a Tosca at the Canadian Opera Company randomly, and he was the director, and I was like, "Wait, you work at LA Opera? Like, I'm fucking from LA. What? How? Okay." Um, and he is not a coddler, but he is the best at saying, you watch you do a scene, yeah, that was shit.
Mm.
Completely devoid of you were shit. You are shit. And so having that brutal, and that's the part of the thing, right? You separate your product from yourself,
Yeah.
where you can look at something that you did for the product and say, oh, that was shit.
Yeah.
Let's fix that.
Right. Right. And not let it destroy you. Right.
Yes, it has nothing to do with you. You're not shit. You're great. You're great. We're gonna fix it. But we both saw that run. That's not good.
Right. Like that's why we're in rehearsal, to be shit and
Yeah,
get better. Like that's the whole point.
yeah, yes.
And if you
So
can't,
there's the balance.
yeah, if you can't grapple with the I am shit now, then you'll never get to
Yes,
I am amazing later.
yes.
Right.
Or not even I am shit,
Or
but
the thing that I did. Yes.
the product is shit. Now we will make it good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed listening to that conversation as much as we enjoyed having it. For part 2, make sure that you stick around, comment, like, subscribe, all the social media stuff, so that you get the next episode beamed straight to you. And if you haven't already, make sure you take that assessment in the description down below to give yourself the unfair advantage the next time you perform.